Morning, Dave McCarthy. How are you today?
I'm very well, Keith. Good morning.
Good, thank you, Dave, for joining. You have a bit of a cold as well as the rest of the country.
Unfortunately.
Tis going, so it is. Now, listen, AIB are introducing some new schemes for struggling mortgage holders. You've got some details for us.
Yeah, basically what they're doing is that they're taking a realistic view of people who are in trouble, and I think this is a template for other banks. And just to say, they're not the first actual bank to introduce the scheme, and I'll go through the details in a minute. There's an Australian financial firm called Pepper who took over GE mortgages last year. Now, there would only been a very small number of people who have mortgages with GE at the time, and they introduced the scheme which AIB is now using as a template. And basically the way it works is, if we just take an example of somebody who owes 300,000 and is in negative equity, what they'll do is that they'll take 200,000 of that, which is the value of the house, we'll say, put it into one loan, and take the other 100,000, park it on an interest-free basis in the longer term. They will write off up to 20% of the 200,000. So in other words, you start repaying, making repayments on 160,000, and subject to certain conditions, if you meet certain repayment targets, you could also get a further reduction on your mortgage as well. So the possibility of getting up to 30 to 40% off the total balance of the mortgage over the remaining life of the loan is possible. It means that people will be able to afford to stay in their homes, and they'll also be able to afford to meet the repayments. If at some stage down the road you come into a windfall, or you're in a position to clear some of the money off the second part of the loan, well, then they'll give you an incentive to do that as well. It's basically a very realistic view of where they stand, and I think it's a template for other banks. You do not apply, if you're listening this morning and you're in financial difficulty with an AIB mortgage, you don't apply to them for this. They will choose who they'll offer it to. How many people are going to be offered this loan, it remains to be seen, but it's over time it has to be in the thousands anyway. Okay. And the other thing that's happened in the mortgage market too, Keith, is KBC Bank have become kind of the first bank to encourage people to come back to the good days of, maybe if you want to switch your mortgage, they're offering a lower rate than the variable rate from other banks if you meet certain conditions and the mortgage is less than 60% of the value of your house.
Okay, somebody wants to know, are investors to return to taking on more risk in 2014? I don't even understand the question.
Well, basically, people have been very conservative since the downturn happened, and they've been putting money in deposit, they've been putting money into safe investments because of fear. Fear is a dreadful thing in the financial world, but we've seen matters move on over the last 2 to 3 years, where fear of the collapse of the euro and fear of a total implosion of the Irish economy have dissipated, to the extent that, whilst we're not looking at a boom, we're certainly looking at a more positive outlook. And it means that people, if they want to get a return on their money, they have to take on some risk. If you want complete security, you're going to suffer in terms of return. That is a fact of life now. And if you want to leave your money in deposit and you get complete security, well, then you're going to suffer in return. If you want to move into something that has complete security, you will suffer in terms of return. So the sensible thing is, and the indications are all there, that investors are taking some risk with their money in order to get returns over the next year or two.
Okay, finally, Dave, I have a paid up pension benefits from a previous company. I'm just wondering what options I have, as I'm completely confused as to how these monies are invested.
This is quite a common situation, Keith, where people have moved from one employer to another and they've left their pension benefits with the previous employer. And in some cases, even around Galway, we've seen people who've worked for many years for some of the medical devices companies, and they might have had 15 to 20 years of benefits sitting there. Basically, you should be getting up-to-date information on how it's performing. You can take control of it by moving it into what's called a retirement bond, and I won't get too technical on that. But the number of people, as I said, who are out there who need to inform themselves about their previous pension benefits and not just leave it sit there until they reach age 65. Now, I just draw a distinction here. If you're in what's called a defined benefit scheme, well, that's totally different. But most people in recent years are in defined contribution, and it needs to be reviewed. So I would say to that person, you need to get up-to-date advice.
All right, Dave McCarthy, McCarthy & Associates. You can contact Dave on 091 566 022 for further details. That's 091 566 022 for further details.
The Finance